Spirit, confidence and growth. Climbing the stairs of desire. The stair climbing strategy of want, get, be satisfied, want different, get, be satisfied over and over is the most effective that exists. You're not supposed to be in any one of those three states too long. You're supposed to cycle through them. As a living person, it's not normal or desirable to be totally still, neither in emotion or location. To be human is to experience not just the storms and calms of Mother Nature, but of our own passions. Frequency illusion. The Bader-Meinhof phenomenon is the phenomenon where something you recently learned suddenly appears everywhere, also called frequency bias or illusion. The Bader-Meinhof phenomenon is the seeming appearance of a newly learned or paid attention to concept in unexpected places. De-signing your life. Get rid of all the reminders and distractions. Be your own faithful servant. Stack the odds in your favor. Find every edge and use every trick to make the path of least resistance the one that brings long-term fulfillment. Make decisions now that your future self will be likely to follow. It's a cascade. The better you stack the deck now, the better hand your future self will get to play. Overconfidence. For normally powered individuals, overconfidence is way better than underconfidence. Daniel Kahneman's advice is dangerous. You may have seen an article in New York Magazine regarding his thinking fast and slow. He says that the most likely emotion to cause you to make an incorrect decision is overconfidence. Some think it's the dumbest advice ever written, because overconfidence is what allows people to do things outside the social norms and reap the rewards of having no competition in a market, or being the first to do something, or making a breakthrough. Your chances of being overconfident or undereducated are the least today that they have ever been because of the advent of 500 people on Facebook telling you what a dumbass you might be and how good Google information is. Those 500 people could be a good test of your idea. If you are ever going to be overconfident, this is the time to do it. Obviously, more risk weighs upon your decisions if you're a government or otherwise have the energy of many people at your disposal, and you should be more cautious if your sphere of influence is large. There may be more at stake than you initially realize. Overconfidence is hard to measure. Further, in regard to Kahneman's thing, is that he is giving you non-actionable advice. You can't tell whether you are overconfident or not, so you can't take his advice to not be overconfident. You can be full of doubt, and with today's progress, you could do a thing 4 times wrong and have enough to do the 5th right, while the other guy is still doubting himself. Doubting doesn't produce anything. Overconfidence may produce many incorrect iterations, but also produces the possibility of getting it right eventually. Aging directors and storytellers mellow with age. Testosterone is a great deal when you've got much to gain and little to lose. Yet the longer you've been around, the more the inverse becomes true. You end up with more to lose and less to gain. The same effective reduction in risk-taking that is wise in a weakening body is wise economically as well. Look at great musicians or filmmakers. You will notice that as their testosterone dies down, the types of films they want to make become less aggressive. They become bigger pussies, instead of rage or conquest-driven competitive people. Directors and storytellers mellow with age. Pathing. Pathing quotes. Benjamin Franklin said to write things worth reading or do things worth writing. If you would not be forgotten, as soon as you are dead and rotten, either write things worth reading or do things worth the writing. Sell not virtue to purchase wealth, nor liberty to purchase power. Notice that would is spelled exactly as that in the source document. Poor Richard, 1738. An Almanac for the Year of Christ, 1738. Do what wasn't inevitable. What you should do is your potential impact multiplied by the number of people it will impact. There's another question to ask in relation, which is, would someone else have achieved that instead of you anyway? Thus, there's value in doing the thing that wasn't going to happen anyway. Do what wasn't inevitable. If you're writing your thesis, do not do what is interesting. Instead, do what is interesting and useful because it's easy to do. Interest is very easy to pique, and therefore, what is of interest to you should also be helpful to the world. The good news is, if it's helpful to the world, you can actually make money on it. Imagine a sick child. The child is dying in the deathbed because of a progressing cancer, and in trying to save the child, your solution is a smartphone app. You pull up Uber and you hand over the iPad. Now you keep looking at the child whining in pain and you ask, why aren't these things working? The answer is that they're not supposed to. Apps don't cure people. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and in order to create some positive benefit to the world, you need to know how to do the thing, then actually do the thing. Well then, which of these two is the weaker link? Is the world more lacking in the ability or knowledge of how to do things? Or is it more lacking in the desire to do things? SciVive will tell you what the world is missing is desire. Otherwise, everyone would have a six-pack, be fit, and would spend time with their families and do all of the things that they know they should do. They don't have a lack of knowledge on how. They have a lack of desire and motivation to do so. If you want to play with the big boys and want to have the biggest impact on the world and be able to brag that you work on the hardest stuff that exists in the known universe, the human being is the answer. Do one thing exceedingly well. Fear not the man who knows 1,000 different techniques, but fear the man who knows one technique very well. Well, why would the education system be any different? Shouldn't you just learn to do one thing really well and then move on to the next thing? A much higher, better use of your intellectual abilities, business talents, talents of any form, are to not solve what other people think are problems, but to solve what you think are problems. This is assuming that you're smarter than they are and have better beliefs. People wonder whether sometimes it's better to go into physics or biology. Well, you're made of meat, and you could say you're made of physics. But let's take a look at that. Our understanding and application of physics has taken a great deal of money and very well-educated people and executed it over a couple of 100 years. That's part of a particle physics. But before they knew particles really existed, you can call it maybe 1,000 or 2,000 years with the Greek discovery of the theory of parts, where everything is actually made of smaller things. Great! That was the first instance of this atomization of the world. Now let's take a look at the biological world. How much energy has the biological world put into figuring it out? Billions of years with the energy of the sun behind it. It literally invented sex, it invented DNA, it invented mutation. Amazing feats. This is good stuff. Now, they've been at it for billions of years. They've had more time to do it. They didn't require experts to do it. Every species got to participate in the process, and they didn't require a small fortune to do it. You have to compare. What do you think is going to create more progress in the world? Learning from the organisms that have had billions of years and the power of the sun, where every component got to participate, or a couple hundred guys with lots of money over the last couple hundred years. Learning from biology is going to help the world more than trying to recreate a singularity in a particle accelerator. In things that aren't subjective, there isn't a natural human pre-programmed emotional response limit to the progress that can be made. How fast can computers get? Well, pretty close to the speed of light as you move on up. There's a bunch of computer science theory guys that will argue with that, but many would agree that it's a lot easier to build faster computers than it is to make better tasting food because of the human limiting factor. Might you be able to take advantage of this? Yes. Focus on what matters. If you have studied for a year in being good at something that is touchy, feely, subjective, limited, like art, you may never become great in that area. The world may not need you to become great in that area, and the chance that you waste a huge chunk of your life doing something no one is willing to pay for and not even becoming good at it is much higher than if you did something that the world is willing to pay for and is easier to excel at and isn't limited by subjective experience. Now, what might those things be? Can you build a house? People like living in houses. We all like living in houses. Nobody likes getting rained on, snowed on, and struck by lightning. Houses are great. Now, how smart must you be to build a house? Not too smart. We put a foundation down. Concrete sounds good. We stack some bricks up on the outside to make walls that look good. Does it need to be pretty on the inside? Sure. Do you like electricity? Sure. You can run some pipe, you run some wire, you cover it with drywall, you mud the drywall, you sand and you paint it. These are things that children could do in playgrounds building sandcastles. You just have more expensive sand. Literally, that's what concrete is. It's expensive sand that's glued together. SciVive would rather see you put your time into something that's guaranteed to pay off and be amazing for you, and get that base framework in where you're useful. You're effective, and you bought your own free time to choose what you're going to do with the rest of your life. Now, try and put the artful thing first that's unlikely to pay off, and put you in a world of servitude, where you must always spend all of your time helping other people achieve their dreams so that you can get the money to try and fund yours. What's the summary of all this? You need to know the difference between what can be taught and what can't be taught, between what is more instinctual and harder to teach. Why? Because in this free world, if you are lucky enough to what you get to spend your time on and what you get good at, you're going to reap a lot of profit. By getting good at that which you are pre-inclined to get good at, or is of highest and best use to the world and teachable more so than you are perhaps becoming an artist, competing against the machines, competing against all the past, competing against tools that aren't improving. Paint and paintbrushes have not improved. Canvas has not improved. What are you going to do? How are technology and the progress of time helping you achieve your goals? You just chose the hardest path that pays the least while being the hardest to teach. How long do you bash your head against the wall before you realize you should have built a base, been useful, been productive for the world and yourself rather than messed around however you wanted? Common habits of focus and common useful questions can help you choose your path. Can I do this 10 times faster or larger? Who can help me with this? Who already has had this problem? Are there other people who work in fields close to this problem? How can this help the most people? Is this the best thing I can be focused on? Jack of all trades, master of none. The more things you're good at, the more lost potential you have. Let's say that you're really good at more than one thing. You do one of those things well. You're not doing other ones. Thus, the ratio of things that you're good at, the more things you're good at, increases the ratio of things you're not doing. Let's assume you can only do one thing at a time. You're good at 10 things. Now, 9 things that you're good at, you're not doing, because you're doing the one thing. Now let's say that you're good at 100 things. Now there's 99 things you are good at and you're not doing. Look at all the unhappiness you can have then. If you focus on being great on a single thing, then when you do that thing, you're not missing out on your potential in all the other things you could have been good at. Do what you're cut out for and measure your cut. For example, you want to see whether you have perfect pitch, which is the ability to hear a note that is played musically and know exactly what that note is with perfect accuracy. It's insanely rare and uncommon. If you have that ability, then you could, and very likely will, have a much better chance of being able to perform, produce, create, or analyze all different types of music. Just the same way that if you look at the percentage of people over 7'6" who play basketball, you will find that some majority of those people play in the NBA. If you've got perfect pitch, definitely focus on music. If you've got a fourth cone in your eye, definitely look at art and things with color. Similarly, if you're 7'6" tall, give basketball a try. These are some of the few instances where obvious, measurable genetic differences can affect your inclination to be good at a specific thing. These are things you can test. You can measure yourself. You can go on audiocheck.net and take the perfect pitch test. It's nice to be able to benchmark yourself. You can go on humanbenchmark.com and check your ration, time, ability, memory, and all kinds of other cool stuff. Put your effort into the important things. The Pareto principle says that 80% of consequences come from 20% of the causes, asserting an unequal relationship between inputs and outputs. This means don't waste 80% of your effort to only get 20% of the results. Use it in your personal endeavors so that you address your weak points. SciVive likes to call it Pareto efficiency. Wish for more wishes. Somewhere along the way, adults lose the smarts that kids come up with. They just assume that whatever you want isn't really on the table, so they aim for the floor. If you could dream the biggest dream, and whatever you wanted would become instantly reality, what would you dream for? Now harness the power of jealousy. Many normal humans with fewer resources than you currently have achieved likely more than what you're asking for. So they can't both be true. What you want can't be impossible at the same time that others are already living that reality. Thus, which belief is more powerful for you to hold? The one that gives you the chance at greatness, or the one that has you failing by default and not learning what the real challenges are? The virtual challenges are enough to keep your weak ass down. Go out there in the world and discover what the real challenges are. Only 6 human needs? No. Tony Robbins' 6 human needs: certainty, connection, significance, variety, contribution, growth, are a bad way to organize human motivations. Nah, that's stupid. Where is greed on there? Where is fear? This is an inadequate system for organizing life. Emotions have a reason. Every emotion has a reason for its existence. All these simple belief systems leave out critical emotion like greed or rage or envy. They just choose a couple and say those are the ones that matter, like safety. The map isn't the territory, and these models of human emotion are rather oversimplified. Caring is a resource. You have to choose what you don't care about, just as you have to choose what you buy and don't buy with your money. You have to choose which things you'll use your limited caring currency on. Be the master of your emotions. Comedians and musicians make their living causing people to experience good feelings. You too can make yourself feel good in the same ways. When you're living in tune with your expectations, you'll find a lasting inner glow and smile that just doesn't seem to go away. When it first appears, you'll be curious as to why it is that you're happy for no reason. This is the hidden and lasting joy that comes with living up to one's expectations. Adversarial internal logic. It's normal when one side wants to quit the behavior, but on the other side wants to engage in the behavior. Adversarial internal logic is a breakthrough in machine learning. It's an effective system that works in courts as well. Crying. Feeling terrible? Try thinking about how terrible you feel, wondering if you hit an all-time record. It might shift your perspective into the joy of whether you've achieved a new status in life, gone somewhere you've never gone before. You might also just feel worse. Some have practiced by just thinking, how amazing is it that one can feel so bad right now from things only in one's head? And instantly the feeling subsided. Everything matters. Temperature affects behavior. Diet affects behavior. Religion affects behavior. Gender affects behavior. Race affects behavior. Time of day affects behavior. Recent social interactions affect behavior. Weather affects behavior. People doing the same bad things commonly, and a single judge, being tired of seeing it over and over, deals out harsher penalties to see if it can make a difference, also happens. Everything matters. Yes, literally everything matters. If you find yourself arguing that something doesn't matter, you are wrong. Everything matters. Judges are more lenient, and after they've had a snack and feel satiated. If you find yourself arguing that something doesn't matter, you are wrong. Everything matters. Being a nerd. You know you're a nerd when you realize the seasons are changing, and you know this solely because the ads you see on the internet start including bicycles and outdoor stuff. Needing to feel significant is the power you give the world over yourself. Consider the future. Don't fall for the local maximum. Socrates' death. You've optimized for a local maximum of good without regard to the distant future. Had Socrates remained alive and discovered or shared more, the far future of mankind would have benefited far more than whatever the local people of his time may have. Thus, for the majority of humans that will ever exist, it was surely not good. Values and beliefs. Choosing your destiny. Include quality in your value delta multiplied by market share. Elon Musk has said that the best way to choose what direction you take with a business or career is that you estimate how much better what you think you can achieve is over what people are currently doing, and multiplying that by how many people you will affect. So you can do a lot for a few people or a little for many people. It's an okay way to look at things, but sadly it relies entirely on what people will pay for. And as we've seen forever, fools and their money are easily parted. So people will pay dearly for all the wrong things. Qualitatively, it's not the best way to look at what you should be doing. Who gives a damn what most idiots want? Let's make attempts at wanting something better. The Fermi paradox. The Fermi paradox, named after physicist Enrico Fermi, is the apparent contradiction between the lack of evidence for extraterrestrial civilizations and various high estimates for their probability. Where are all the aliens? The important question is whether that terrible event preventing aliens who've had billions of years to dick around and be seen doing it has already occurred, and we passed it, or has yet to occur, and we're screwed. It's basically a clue that some things are likely to be coming our way, extinction-level events, or at least disassociate with physical space events. Because we're bounded by the speed of light, appeals to there being infinite stars aren't useful. Those huge number of stars are too far away to matter. They might as well be different universes or the past. Far away stuff doesn't matter, and we aren't first. The reasons we're not likely to be first to be conscious and alive in the universe is because there's only a single first slot, and nearly infinite not first slots. Thus, we're nearly infinitely not likely to be first. First or not doesn't matter, because everyone else is too far away to ever meet. Damn you, speed of light limit. Turning inward isn't as likely as turning outward. Choosing to turn inward instead of traveling the stars is not likely, for turning inward still has an energy cost, and energy is finite per unit of space. Thus, you must choose between starving other life of energy, think trees competing for height, or you can expand. Expanding has too much profit to be ignored by that which evolved to meet the question. Make a great melting pot. For real. Let's just get some diversity in all the other countries too. Let's just open up all the borders. Force every country to reflect the makeup of the world and watch it all fall apart and split up again. Worried about no diversity where you live? Great. Go destroy all diversity by equally mixing everyone everywhere. Vive la différence. Ignorance of difference is insulting and demeaning. Get an agreement that calling everyone the same is bad. Point to a set that has two parts that would be insulted if you call them the same, perhaps Jamaican and African, or Chinese and Japanese. Get agreement that calling two different peoples the same thing is insulting. Replace those parts with male and female gender instead of nationality. Hope they get the analogy that calling men and women the same is as insulting as it was to call the other two parts the same. You could also use skin color or language or age or height as the blurred lens you're looking at people through. Whatever you think the listener will have the easiest time noticing, that ignoring differences is wrong. The result should be the realization of trying to destroy differences is harmful, and where it should be done, the benefit should outweigh the cost. It would be insulting to say that everyone from Africa was the same, as it would be to say that all black people were the same, as it would be to say men and women are all the same. The ignorance of difference is insulting. Destroying differences is worse than insulting, and thus perhaps your quota on how many people of a certain type should be in your job or profession is also insulting. Perhaps their choice as to where they want to exist and what they want to do is superior to yours. Stop insulting and doing other larger harms to people by assuming you know better for them what profession or lifestyle they should be leading. You wouldn't do it with their music or with their choice of beverage, so how dare you do it in regards to their work or education? Differences between men and women. If you think men and women are the same, you either don't know much about men or women or both. Women get cancer less than men. If women have a pay gap, getting lower pay for jobs that should pay the same, then men have an hours gap, doing more work than women. The inverse could show the stupidity of it, trading women pay gap for male hours gap. Priorities. What are you actually making profit off doing? What's really worth it? To help you see, what would you be willing to pay to do everything you do? No more free things, not even your job. It's unfair to call things wage gaps, as it makes a presupposition that things are supposed to be equal, and we have a natural tendency to dislike gaps. Maybe you should write a book. If you're smart enough to educate yourself and have the correct opinion about a subject, then why let that benefit die in your mind? You might as well help others benefit from the work you've put in. It's similar to the idea that if you're smart enough to buy the right product at a good price, then you're also smart enough to advertise and let others benefit from that good decision you made. They're two sides of the same coin. If you're smart enough to know what to buy, from whom, and why, then you're smart enough to transmit that same information on to the next person so he can make the same informed decision. If you need to be well educated on a thing to have that good thing in your life, then you can, if you choose, let others benefit from that knowledge. As a bonus, sharing that knowledge can even be profitable to you. Everyone wins. Intelligent design. Why is your heart not directly in the middle? Why does your stomach work better when you sleep laying one direction instead of another? Inbreeding might be a feature, not a bug. Inbreeding is problematic and often illegal. Wouldn't it have been easier to make having children with your own children impossible, as it's impossible for humans to generate offspring with a horse? Seems like the system for making kids isn't well optimized. Perhaps it's a feature, not a bug though. If you can't find any other mate at all, maybe inbreeding beats extinction as far as survival goes. Appearing good while being bad. Fudging the crime stats. Makeup, corsets, lying. These all make you look good while you remain bad, if not worse. The failure of philosophy. If you've read any of the great books of history, you already stand in honor of them. If only the great thinkers of yore had the learnings and tools that we now have. If you insert into their teachings the things we know now, that they knew not, a new great work would result. What do we have that they did not? Computation, evolution, game theory, hundreds of years working on the things they left for us to build on. This great wealth of knowledge not only adds but subtracts from some of the silly ideas the greats had. Silly things like Schopenhauer's belief that life is pain. What an easy to disprove assumption. One need only visit a sunny park with one's eyes open. Contentment or even boredom is a much more common state than pain. For those uninjured, pain is a much more rare state than most others. Smashing hundreds of years of discoveries into the great teachings of old destroys the thin veneers of inaccuracy and leaves polished the enduring stone. Only through the application of this hard-fought knowledge we've worked so hard for over hundreds of years can we see the ancient, lasting knowledge for the gift that it was, free of the clutter of dated ideas. The meaning of the universe, our reality. Don't cry over spilled milk, or milk that will have spoiled by the time you figure out if it's spilled or not. Only what is local and soon matters most. If the universe is one of many, or a simulation, it truly matters not. Those problems or opportunities are the purview of those who are able to pass the hurdle of survival. Biological problems are coming to kill you, and all that you love. They must be solved first. Mind and body are the same. Most people think their mind and body are separate until you remove little parts of the brain in their body. Then you discover that the mind stops existing as you take bites out of the brain. That being said, you'll spend more time in your head than anywhere else in the world, so you might as well be great at it. Benefit the many, and they will benefit you back. SciVive wants you to feel good about doing things for the many, so they can do things for you. You will get more out of helping others than you can get out of helping yourself. This says doing stuff once is weak, and doing stuff for the many is strong, which is a statement about scaling, which could easily go under power. However, it's only useful if you choose to schedule personal development, and really it's supposed to change your general belief and value in regards to helping the many over helping the few, of which the single is you, is definitely few. The problem with personal development is that there's only one you. You can't multiply your benefit by a whole bunch of people. The point here is that in a world where you can scale, you will always get more by helping others than by helping yourself. If you live in a house and you didn't build it by hand or speak a language that you didn't invent, clearly your life is massively influenced by many people who you have likely never met. If you can help the masses, they will help you back in ways you couldn't dream. Focus on the many and know that you are not the many. Nightmares are awesome. What better thing could your brain be doing than pre-processing good actions for you to take if the worst things happen? Would you rather your brain instead prepare for doing all the right things when everything is going great? When everything is great, you probably don't have to worry that much. You become what you focus on. What you focus on early in life will color everything else you do afterward. Elon Musk read space books, loved space. Now he does space. Anthony Robbins had somebody who came by to feed his family. Now he has a feeding people charity. If something affects you early in life, it is very likely to affect you later on in life. That stuff matters. Bill Gates has almost wiped out polio. We don't have to wait 20 years for that. It could happen in the next 5 years, right? Care most about the things that are exponentially powerful now and happen now, and then we can revisit these other things later. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Anytime you have a gift and you're not using it, you feel regret even if you know that gift isn't what you should be doing. You may be a very social person. You love talking to people. You're exceedingly good at it. Unfortunately, you may find that you can measure the output and benefit that you've had in the real world from the connections and social interactions you've had with people, and deduce that they weren't that profitable. The things you can do at scale that affect thousands of people far outweigh the one-on-one conversations that you've had. I guess the only people that wouldn't agree with that measurement are people that have never had the privilege of doing things at scale. Whether they be speaking in front of an audience, having a business, writing a book, or having a blog or vlog or whatever, you choose. What's here, the damned if you do, damned if you don't. I'm going to come up with a better phrase for it, because that phrase sucks. Here's the problem. Anytime you have a gift and you're not using it, you feel regret, even if you know that gift isn't what you should be doing. How do you win that one? Game theory. To punish the bad behavior of those that have wronged you, you will naturally feel like being angry, or hurt, or retaliatory, all of which instantly harm the quality of your life. Meanwhile, the person that harmed you gets to act even nicer in apology, or may be oblivious to the fact that you're even transmitting angry looks and words in his or her direction. He may be too far away. You lose, and he doesn't, all because earlier he gained from your expense. Dream books, dream boards. The best way to understand the value of a dream book, or whatever fancy word for reminding yourself through environment of a different pattern of focus than you may otherwise engage in, is to know if it influences your behavior. If it influences your behavior and you choose the image, choose the meaning, and you choose accurately, then it's useful. If it doesn't influence your behavior, or even worse, if it influences your behavior in a direction that was counterintuitive to your selection of the image, or whatever it is that you're looking at, or influencing yourself through environment with, then you're farther away from where you started. Vision boards and dream boards can be a waste of time, but there's this specific exclusion to how one should use them. If you paste up sheet music on your refrigerator and sheet music on your bedroom wall, it's a world different than putting up sheet music in front of an instrument that you actually play. If you cover your house in recipe books, it's a world different than if you have a recipe book when you're actually making some food. Some feel that vision boards, dream boards, menus, and diagrams, and all of those things are infinitely more useful when they're directing your focus, when you're working in the space at that very moment. SciVive thinks that they're less useful when they're just posted everywhere and they're not really causing immediate influence. Emotions. Introduction. These are the parts of your brain that usually influence you before you influence them. It's like a good friend telling you a joke. They're going to make you laugh because you respond to their input. Spirit is the non-physical part of a person, which is the seat of emotions and character, the soul, and the prevailing or typical quality, mood, or attitude of a person, group, or period of time. If you feel loved or connected to the universe, or a part of something larger and more important or religious, those underlying feelings affect how you feel and perform, and whom and what you spend your time with. It's important stuff. Happiness. Ride the victories. Get a peak and hold it without resampling the happiness. Increase happy time with little amperage. Do not spoil what you have by desiring what you have not, but remember that what you now have was once among the things you only hoped for. Epicurus, Greek philosopher, 341 BC to 270 BC. Being happy and complacent gets outperformed and selected against. Happiness is overrated. The happiness is overrated argument works as a counterpoint to the enjoying of life and emotional mastery. It's overrated for performance and future happiness. However, it's an instant win in the short term. A lot of people really care about how they feel. And yes, for your internal environment, your average emotional state, your quality of life, the quality of emotions that pop up, and how often and for what duration and intensity they occur in your life, that is your quality of life. There's something else outside your quality of life. There's the likelihood that the system you create through behavior enforces those things to be harder or easier to appear. You might be able to force happiness as a homeless person who's in constant pain because you can't afford good medical care. You might be able to do that. However, you might find it's a lot easier to be happy when you're not in constant pain and you're not homeless, because you have slightly more money, because you learned a skill that you're good at. It might even be enjoyable for you to do something that may not directly give you the same happiness, like controlling your focus and having positive beliefs. It surely works, which is why when you interrogate people in regards to their happiness level at certain salary ranges, and their answers are up to $70,000 a year, you just keep getting happier the more money that you make. However, at $70,000, the happiness curve falls off and it goes negative. Internal emotional environment. SciVive likes the idea of your emotions being your internal environment because just like your environment in the real world, it is going to trigger you more than you're going to trigger it. The environment has a lot more momentum than you do. It's not always easier for it to be non-reactive to you than it is for you to be non-reactive to it. As far as your emotions go, your internal landscape environment is going to be like the constant operating pressure that you exist under that can cause a movement in direction that's very nice or a direction that's very slow. It's like walking through mud, deep mud, or having the wind at your back. All your beliefs and values and common meanings that you assign to things are what is going to filter all of the new reality that you experience as you're traveling down the path. And it won't always be a path. A lot of times, it will be up against the making a path of your own. Trailblazing, they call it. Those filters of beliefs, values, and meanings that you assign are going to change the internal environment with the matchup between the new things that you run into that are either inside or coming from the outside, but they're entering your consciousness, either subconscious or conscious. Once they've gone through that filter, they change the wind, they change the weather, and they change the walking. Unlike many environments, your internal emotional environment can change in a heartbeat. Unlike the environment in the real world, in your emotional environment, it is you that has the momentum, whereas the environment itself is actually another variable. Better emotions in your life. Do you want to have better emotions in your life? Great! Sit up in your chair straight now. Breathe deeply, and just hold that posture for a minute. I want you to think of a time when you felt really proud about something, really intense feelings of pride. You deserve to feel great right now. Feeling great right now, think about what would happen if you took the same belief, the same habit of feeling great and deserving to feel great, and did a little more often in your life. It's only a couple sentences of work, and it could pay a lifetime of benefits if you feel like it's a good thing to throw in there. If you read a book and it just tells you to do a little mind trick that makes you sit up and feel good, and then you actually follow along, which most people have to. Don't think about a giant pink elephant right now. SciVive commands you, no giant pink elephant thinking. The human brain can't understand that. It has to frame it in the positive and imagine it. SciViving. There is this wonderful practice called SciViving. It's a way to be happier more often and nearly free. If you are concerned with the quality of life that you have, the quality of life that you have is to a large degree the quality of emotions that you have in your life. We don't have that many words to describe them, and we don't even really feel that many core emotions. Let's talk about food, for example. Beef, chicken, steak, fish. There aren't that many core types of meat. Yes, there's different kinds of birds. Yes, there's different types of four-legged creatures that are larger and smaller that are tasty. The point is, if you're willing to categorize emotions reasonably and ask people to write down the emotions they feel in an average day, you're not going to get more than 12 answers. If it's true that it's only basically 12 types of feelings you can feel in a day, that's quite wide a range. Most people's range is much lower than that. Then, the quality of life that you have is based on the rules you have for that quality, and your ability to associate them with descriptive words. If, in order for you to be happy, you have to have a six-pack, 10% body fat, make $1 million a year, have a model girlfriend or boyfriend, and win a hard contest that is competitive in any arena once a year, you're screwed. If every single one of those things is an and statement, this and that have to be true for me to be happy, and if all of those things don't happen, I can't be happy, then you're in trouble because you set up the rules of the game where you can't win. Sometimes using an or rule is better than an and rule. As a result, you've got two options. You can either change your rules through effort, dedication, and programming in new rules, or be superhuman and just hit those metrics all the time. Good luck with that. You can also change your sampling frequency. You can change the rate at which you measure how you're matching up on these goals. This is SciVive's intention. If you're happy because you're hearing some great music or something cool is happening, you lock that thought in and you make no effort to measure anytime soon to see whether you shouldn't be happy anymore. You prolong the next sample, the frequency, the rate, the time between this sample and the next one. As soon as you've got a good one, you slow down your sampling. Ride the dream. Why not ride that high for longer? If the mission of doing the thing is to feel important and you already feel important, why risk that feeling of success you just had? Achieve a high and ride it. If the goal is to maintain happiness, then you can greatly increase the chance that you will remain happy by achieving a high and riding it. If you catch a wave as a surfer, you stay on it until it's over. You don't try to catch another wave while you're still riding the first awesome wave that you caught, because you would crash and you would burn. More accurately for surfers, you would wipe out. Short, measurable goals. If you don't want to wipe out emotionally, do a good thing. Have reasonable goals. Hopefully, goals within a reasonable range of what you can do, so you can get a taste of success and find the easier way to your next goal. You can just set smarter goals and do it more frequently instead of setting a goal you can never reach, which just causes you pain. Having goals that are too large and sampled slowly is not smart. Having goals that are small and sampled quickly is smart. You get faster rewards. That's why video games are so addictive. You don't have to wait a year to see whether you beat the boss or not. You fight the boss. You win right now within 5 or 10 minutes, maybe an hour or two max. Maybe you've never heard of this system before. You have heard of changing your rules, your beliefs, your habits, your skills, but you may have never heard of purposefully manipulating the frequency of which you measure whether you've met your goals or not. Measure faster when life is difficult so you can swallow some wins quicker. Measure slower when you've already caught an amazing wave if you're trying to optimize for your emotional happiness. If you're not trying to optimize for that, if you're trying to optimize for just crushing and being the most effective person in the world, and you're the kind of person who can crush and be effective while sad or otherwise emotionally distracted, you might find more performance by not being extra happy, through changing the way you measure whether you should be or not. You might be the kind of person that can torture themselves into progress and success, as some people are. I would say most people, when they crush their souls and crush their dreams and make everything impossible to win, would respond rather reasonably with giving up. Many would rather go do something else, nearly anything else, whether it be drink, smoke, blow one's ears out with loud music, or otherwise distract from the frustration. Forget all that pressure. The funniest part is there isn't any pressure. You invent it. There is no actual pressure. You're at one atmosphere of pressure, just like everybody else. If you want to ride the waves and have a slightly more enjoyable life, ride the highs. Don't ride them forever. When the wave is over, it's over. But don't jump off of a good wave to jump back into the horror if you're trying to actually enjoy life. Take the time to be proud of yourself as well. Sampling frequency is a totally awesome way to refer to it. Anyone that's ever had a CD player has been exposed to that word for a long time. Probably few actually know what it means, though. Mind set to feeling. If you ever want a nice excuse to get rid of feeling bad or some negative emotion, just think about how non-productive you are, and think, if you're non-productive anyway, might as well be happy, regardless. Paul Ekman, Emotions. Paul Ekman is an American psychologist and professor emeritus at the University of California, San Francisco. He's a pioneer in the study of emotions and how they manifest in facial expressions. He has created an atlas of emotions with more than 10,000 facial expressions and has gained a reputation as the world's foremost human lie detector. For more than 40 years, Ekman has supported the view that emotions are discrete, measurable, and physiologically distinct. His most influential work revolved around the finding that certain emotions appeared to be universally recognized, even in cultures that were pre-literate and could not have learned associations for facial expressions through media. Another classic study found that when participants contorted their facial muscles into distinct facial expressions, such as disgust, they reported subjective and physiological experiences that matched the distinct facial expressions. Ekman's research findings led him to classify 6 emotions as basic: anger, distrust, fear, happiness, sadness, and surprise. Robert Plutchik, who was a professor emeritus at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine and adjunct professor at the University of South Florida, agreed with Ekman's biologically driven perspective, but developed the wheel of emotions, suggesting 8 primary emotions grouped on a positive or negative basis: joy versus sadness, anger versus fear, trust versus disgust, and surprise versus anticipation. Some basic emotions can be modified to form complex emotions. The complex emotions could arise from cultural conditioning or association combined with the basic emotions. Alternatively, similar to the way primary colors combine, primary emotions could blend to form the full spectrum of human emotional experience. For example, interpersonal anger and disgust could blend to form contempt. Relationships exist between basic emotions, resulting in positive or negative influences. 2 dimensions of emotion. Through the use of multidimensional scaling, psychologists can map out similar emotional experiences, allowing a visual depiction of the emotional distance between experiences. A further step can be taken by looking at the map's dimensions of the emotional experiences. The emotional experiences are divided into 2 dimensions, known as valence, how negative or positive the experience feels, and arousal, how energized or enervated the experience feels. These 2 dimensions can be depicted on a 2D coordinate map. This 2-dimensional map was theorized to capture one important component of emotion called core affect. Core affect is not the only component to emotion, but gives the emotion its hedonic and felt energy. Psychological construction. The idea that core affect is but one component of the emotion led to a theory called psychological construction. According to this theory, an emotional episode consists of a set of components, each of which is an ongoing process and none of which is necessary or sufficient for the emotion to be instantiated. The set of components is not fixed, either by human evolutionary history or by social norms and roles. Instead, the emotional episode is assembled at the moment of its occurrence to suit its specific circumstances. One implication is that all cases of, for example, fear, are not identical, but instead bear a family resemblance to one another. Emotional programming. If you built living things from scratch, how would you program them? Think about a world where people harm themselves and don't care to eat or take care of their kin because of bad emotional programming or adherence to emotional programming. Those people would all be selected against. The question becomes, if it's true that everything that's here is here because it was chosen and it worked, then in what ways do some of the behaviors that are not commonly understood to work actually cause effectiveness? For instance, violence, pair bonding, jealousy, rage, frustration, boredom, laziness. You can basically model what the world might look like if you change the existence or strength of any one of those emotional variables. You take something that's universally effective, like delayed gratification, and you wonder how that emotion came into being. For instance, like farming. If you don't farm at the right time, then you don't have food when you need it. Then there's people that couldn't work where it wasn't obviously necessary, and would lose productivity to those people that could do work when only it was necessary in a more hidden and tacit sense. Emotions are how you got here. Emotions are the programming that allowed the unbroken chain of thousands of lovers to become your ancestors. If one single pair of people in that chain didn't raise their children to the point where they could find a partner of their own and raise children to do the same, you wouldn't exist to read this book of SciVive right now. This is also the reason that you feel so strongly about the opposite sex. It's the pull of your ancestors, and the same effective programming that served them for those many thousands of years. Don't be the weakest and last link. Make babies, or make sure you're okay with being the last of a 100,000-year chain of successful parents. Life's main purpose is to survive and produce more life, and we owe this debt to the universe in return for allowing us this experience. If you don't feel that pull, then you might be executing the variety strategy, which means that we must be different than our ancestors, for the robust species wins in the long run over the super specialized species. Being an omnivore is hugely advantageous. If your programming for variety has led you to not have sex with the opposite gender, then you might be the end of your chain. Maybe you can cheat by being a sperm donor or artificial insemination, but the odds are that you'll just be the last of your lineage. It's a funny way to look at the paths we find ourselves on. Either you're doing difference from your ancestors for robustness, or you're doing the same stuff because it's known to work. You can't really escape the paradigm. If you look at spiders, they often make exactly the same pattern of webs that their parents made, even though they've never met them. Some creatures are born with less desire to be novel or break the mold, so to speak. We as humans are probably the most likely to try different things of any living thing we're aware of. Have you ever seen reports of men who just can't stop having sex with the tailpipes of cars? A very strange autoerotica, so to speak. How often have you seen other animals trying to have sex with a car? We surely are pushing the limits of having kids with whatever we can. If there's ever a fertility treatment for steel and aluminum, the world might experience a car population explosion. Thus, your spirit, your feelings, the programming which has served the tens of thousands of men and women who ate, made love, and made sure your ancestors ate and made love, and were safe until you were old enough to have sex and perpetuate the process. That programming, that giant, long, unbroken chain that results in you here reading these words, that is the real decider of what you will become, what your actual soul is. Our programming. Programming exists without software and hardware. Take a look at any Rube Goldberg machine or windmill. That's also programming. The programming that governs our behaviors, mood, and emotion. The programming that governs our behavior isn't needs, it's mood and emotion. Needs are just a weird combination of certain selected emotions that is not accurate. We come programmed with some pretty great software. For the well and normally programmed of us, lying feels really bad. Keeping secrets is hard. We want people to like us. We get bored. We want to travel. We need to procreate. Some may not particularly like when the truth leads to ethical or moral places that they're not too happy with. For instance, let's say you're on the edge, 50-50, between being gay and being straight. If you flop towards the straight side, you have kids and your genes go on. If you flop to the gay side, you get off that gene pool. There's a very strong evolutionary advantage to flipping on the side of disliking. Homosexuality, because at least in some rare cases, it'll flip you to the side of preferring women to men, or at least get you to try that behavior a couple more times, which might lead to a pregnancy. Should people be able to love whomever they want? Between consenting, unrelated adults, yes. Should people get hated on for the choices they make? No. Should everyone understand why disliking gay stuff has been selected for by reality? Not by us, not by evil, just by what happens to create more of us. Since we're what's left, the only stuff that's worked in the 99.9% of permanent extinction. You kind of have to be sympathetic and empathetic for both sides. The stupid people that may not have too many tools to help manage who and what they are and what they do, they are executing an effective strategy that, if for some reason they were born on the fence, they might flop to the side of having kids, and you have to honor that intention. Then you also have gay people, because you can't program humans perfectly and we have to have variation for evolution. They're just doing the best they can too. They just happen to sometimes be girls in guys' bodies, or guys in girls' bodies, or choose a certain aesthetic over another. Thus, you've got two different systems, both trying to create people and more effective people. In this case, they have conflict, and it creates basically an eternal conflict. 50-50 will always happen. Choosing straight over gay works. Disliking gay helps that happen. Disliking gay gets selected for in terms of evolution. Yet, having variation leads to excellence and durability, so they get selected for. And part of variation is liking different stuff. I guess there's always going to be conflict in this area. It results in two conflicting behaviors that are both getting selected for. By the way, if you have more execution of gay stuff in your crew or tribe of humans, that may appear as a sign of weakness to other tribes of humans, and they may decide to attack you first to take your resources. Sometimes it's not just selected for at the individual level. It is important to note under the evolutionary selection stuff that robustness and the ability to adapt vastly outperforms specialization and niche filling over time. Perceptual excellence. Squinting is a natural response to things being unclear, as is head bobbing and head movement. This is the reason the birds bob their heads around and those things being related to the emotional programming for perceptual excellence. Color response. Animals are great at lots of stuff we're not. You wouldn't want to get into an arm wrestling match with a similarly sized ape, because its muscles attach at different spots to its bones, and therefore it will easily destroy your arm, and maybe eat your face to teach you a lesson about inter-primate respect. Cats can hear up to 60 kHz. We can only hear up to 20 K. We can see about 10 million colors with our eyes, while lizards, frogs, birds, and bugs can see about 100 million. Emotional fitness. Seek love, but don't chase it. Either get some love in your life, make that constant distraction dissipate, or see it as a distraction and focus on it later. If it's a goal, it's a great goal. If it's in the way big time. Or maybe you aren't so passionate or hormonal, and thus less controlled by your baser impulses. Appreciation is the only true wealth. Since gratitude is a key to happiness, it's good to honor those that we owe so much. Rarely have you ever heard anyone genuinely exclaim how lucky they felt that the road was paved, or that they had such a great language available to them that they didn't even need to invent. Thank God for the toilet. Best invention ever. Yet, do you know the inventor's name? The answer? The first modern flushable toilet was described in 1596 by Sir John Harington, an English courtier and the godson of Queen Elizabeth I. Harrington's designed a 2-foot-deep oval bowl, waterproof with pitch, resin, and wax, and fed by water from an upstairs cistern. More improvements followed. Then, in the late 19th century, a London plumbing impresario named Thomas Crapper manufactured one of the first widely successful lines of flush toilets. Crapper did not invent the flush toilet, but he did develop the ball cock, an improved tank-filling mechanism still used in toilets today. To these men and many others, we owe a debt of gratitude. True courage. SciVive would call it courage. It takes courage to jump out into the unknown and say, you know what, I'm going to quit my job, going to eat through my life savings, and I might only improve the outcome 5% by finding the right doctor. Or I could only improve the outcome by 5% by learning about one of these guys who has limited availability, getting you a time slot before someone else that didn't try as hard. That willingness to sacrifice the $200,000 you may have made in whatever job you have in order to get that 5% chance in your life takes courage. It takes creativity to know that it's an option, and it takes courage to do whatever no one else has ever shown you what to do. If it were common that as soon as you get cancer, everyone that loves you quits their jobs and only focuses on your wellness, then it would be a lot easier to do because you'd have a role model for it. Many people have that role model experience because they don't have the financial freedom to do it. Have the courage to endure pain to save energy for breakthrough. Enduring pain in order to stash up enough energy to make a breakthrough, to then have overwhelming success, is like holding your breath before a dive. It is difficult while you're doing it, but it's the only way you can get low enough and get back with enough oxygen. Take whatever you want at the bottom of your dive up to the top and enjoy it. During the hardship of getting no rewards or people telling you what you're doing is stupid is kind of what's required to make the breakthrough, to get to the place that they would never have the courage to reach. Negative emotions. Behavioral benefits of boredom. Boredom exists to make us do something new. Associations exist so that you could not stay at home and lay in bed all day long. It just stopped working and people are tired. A lot of researchers believe that such behaviors evolve because they provide you with great benefits. They haven't appeared at the same pace as the world did. For example, now we've got an obesity epidemic because calories are more readily available than ever before. Ever notice you get bored of things, no matter what the thing is? Video games, people, etc. Hell, even violence gets boring. Why is that? It's a really interesting optimization to prevent processing loops where you can't ever get free. Boredom should seriously be looked at in programming and machine learning the same way that it has paid off for us. Some would guess that boredom is a simple way to maintain search space width instead of depth. Boredom works great when there are lots of smaller problems and places to search with good payoff, and when the payoffs happen early or not at all. When the things you need to beat require tons and tons of deliberate effort, then boredom is your enemy. Pessimism and frustration. Frustration emotionally is like a programming function where you have to decide how far down a path to go before you realize it's a failure. In the real world, if you actually walk down a path to see what's at the end of it, whatever time you spend going down that path, assuming you aren't tired or the environment hasn't changed, is going to take the same amount of time to get back to where you started. Every minute you walk in a direction is going to take you a minute to get back. This assumes that you have to reach the same starting point in order to start to have a new path, which surely isn't always the case. but is pretty common in a wooded area where you need trails. Frustration is an emotion which is basically a halting. It makes you stop what you are doing and try something else. If you change the level, speed, or intensity to which a person feels frustration, what you are actually doing is putting a limit on the depth of their search function. Or, if you don't want to call it a search function, you could call it an experiment function, whereby which they are attempting to do something which didn't previously exist, or they didn't have knowledge of, or they weren't good at. Then, at some point, you decide that we've got the diminishing returns out of this thing. We are as good as we are reasonably going to be in this time frame. Let's switch to something else. How do we affect that change? You could really hate the first thing, or you could really like the next thing. The problem is that the next thing is like this infinite set of all things possible, whereas the first thing is just one thing. It's much easier to cause the switch by causing a distaste for the first thing than it is to try and look into the vastness of everything else and hope that it draws you away from the thing that has consumed your consciousness in the last 5 or 10 minutes. You will find that the amount of minutes and strength to which human beings feel frustration is probably due to the level of difficulty in tasks in the years past, when our emotions really evolved with our desire for fats and sugars, etc. It wouldn't be surprising if the vast majority of tasks existed during that formative period. That's actually a misleading term. We are still being formed just as much now, if not more. For the purpose of this argument, we'll just say formative period. If you looked from an outside perspective at those people having the problems that they did at that time, you would find that the frustration, timing, and intensity matched pretty closely with the difficulty of achieving whatever task might have been at hand, whether it was to plant a seed, get a monkey to stop stealing your food, or keep the other cave guys away from your cave chick. We may never have the opportunity to look at that because progress is happening ever so quickly that based on our own technological innovation, the natural biological kind is going to be outpaced. Jealousy. Everyone is cheating, so don't be too jealous. If you're ever curious why the people of the world are so beautiful, so skinny, and so fit, and so energetic, then guess what? Just like you discover all the athletes of the world are doping and cheating, everyone else in the world is cheating too. Look at all of the drugs that are getting sold, all the diet pills, all the Botox, all of the surgeries, all of the steroids, you name it. Those multi-billion-dollar industries, they have customers. And the customers, they are all those people that you look at and wonder, how did they do that? Evolutionary psychology. If you believe that physical traits evolved, like monkeys having longer arms, to be better at maneuvering in trees and reaching branches farther away, how could you not believe that the monkey's emotions had to evolve as well, to coerce toward even looking up at the tree and decide that was a place where any monkey would want to climb the trunk to get to the limbs anyway? The motivation and desire to use physical tools of one's body is equally important. Imagine what use those long arms would be if monkeys' emotions instead evolved to go swimming. They would be destroyed by crocodiles and sharks. All of our emotions are as, if not more, evolved than our bodies. Greed. Behaviors that aren't self-fulfilling enough are self-extinguishing. It is the reason that you see the same social behaviors in humans that you see in animals. If you want to take advantage of collectivism as an animal, you need to be part of the group, and you need to perform in social bonding experiences. If you become socially defective, you will be kicked out of the group. For this reason, you see animals mostly working only with other animals they can have synergy with. If an animal decided that it would do without food or mating so that some other animal could, that behavior would self-extinguish itself out of the next generation, because over time, even small optimizations that are helpful are selected for. Neglecting your own needs to benefit someone else that is either useless to you or even worse, wants to harm you, is self-extinguishing behavior, and is the reason that pacifists are by far the minority in behavior strategy, both among humans and most other creatures. Any creature that has a territory by definition will fight to keep it. Any creature that values pair bonding will by definition fight to keep its partner from getting bonded by with others. Any behavior that allows you to lose but doesn't have an equal or greater side benefit somewhere else to you will be selected against and disappear over time. Rain is good. Any time that you want to feel better about the rain, just remember the trees and flowers need to drink. Frustration versus anger. Frustration is a halt command. Anger is a follow command. Frustration makes you stop interacting with whatever you're doing. It's the opposite of anger. Anger laser focuses you in on a single thing and gives you tunnel vision. If you see people maniacally laughing with a master plan and you wonder what it is that drives them and how they're able to achieve so much more than anyone else, it's through rage, an all-consuming anger and rage for vengeance. Spirit mind. What is good or bad? Happiness is not the best target. Let's be serious. If you only want happiness out of this life, you're not asking for much. Some argue that it is impossible to do the calculation that utilitarianism requires because consequences are inherently unknowable. Daniel Dennett describes this as the 3-mile island effect. Dennett points out that not only is it impossible to assign a precise utility value to the incident, it is impossible to know whether, ultimately, the near meltdown that occurred was a good or bad thing. He suggests that it would have been a good thing if plant operators learned lessons that prevented future serious incidents that could have been even more disastrous. The question is poorly formed, as there is no such thing as good or bad unless you include when and for whom. As most things that are good or bad are sometimes one way in the short term and another in the long term, and always different based on the party to whom they're occurring. To leave out those obvious variables is negligent. They're obvious, unavoidable, and super important, nearly impossible to not measure things. Wrong for whom? With what objective? At what time? It isn't perfect, but it's a lot better. Why are all these utilitarians trying to optimize for people they don't care about? There's no universal good in resource allocation with infinite human desire and limited real resources. When bad things happen, they might be good in the long run. So do you focus on the short term and feel bad, or on the long term and feel good? Or do you hurt yourself the most and focus on the loss now? Then in the future, when the payoff has kicked in, just refocus back to the past. You can still feel the negative impacts. With more complex systems, you have to be creative and wise to guess what the future will look like. As a matter of fact, it's so hard that we will pay you thousands of millions of dollars. That is, if you can accurately predict the future values of things. Go take out a call or put option on margin in any market at perhaps 40-to-1 leverage. Now, if you're right, you make 40 times your money. If you're wrong, though, you lose the same amount. Certainty is rare. Since certainty is expensive to find, even where it can be found at all, you might take the easy payoff of having a positive outlook. The more comfortable you are with uncertainty, the more joy you will have in your life. When you aren't comfortable with uncertainty, your body and your mind will put you in an unattractive state of stress. You will tunnel vision on that which you fear, and it will destroy your quality of life. Focus on what you want. Let your life be filled with adventure as you travel through appreciatively. Reject the commonly taken path of stress and worry. If stress and worry paid better dividends, they could be considered. They take you farther from where you want to be and lock you in a state of inaction. The coward dies 1,000 deaths. Happiness is often overrated. Why are all these philosophers trying to optimize happiness? If we were meant to be happy more often, we simply would be. Being more happy leads to less effectiveness in the ways that we're used to doing it. The tortured soul must create to relieve pain. The man or woman raised without love must lash out at the world in revenge or find a way to get the love that was so deprived. Much of the greatness that we have in this world is the result of need, not want. Happy people have not need. Happy people's cups are overflowing. It is that removal of need to destroy the common man's need to pursue happiness. If you're already happy, why bust your ass in pursuit? Save the calories. A happy person probably executes morality on others less often and allows the void to creep into the world. That individual doesn't want to lose a happy buzz by having to hack at evil with a hatchet. Better to assume that evil person over there doing evil things is really just like you inside, and they'll see a better way, somehow, hopefully. Hope into one hand, shit into the other, and see which fills faster. Happy and effective can be done, however, as long as effective is a competition among men, and as long as happy removes the need to compete. Pre-happy people will be outperformed by post-happy people, for they must perform, whereas the pre-happy might or might not. He can only lose by playing, for he's already emotionally won. The unhappy person has nothing to lose in the hunt, only gain, for he's already in the hole and sees light at the end of the tunnel. Now these kinds of analogies aren't the kind SciVive likes to make. For as many colors as there are in a rainbow, there's many, many more ways to be human and feel about things and operate. However, one can be pretty certain that if you looked at those humans who gave the most to the world they left before death, you'll find they were described as happier than anything else much more rarely than other emotions, such as driven or focused, etc. Thus, one can feel quite comfortable putting the fate of mankind in the hands of those who must win, and not those for whom winning is only an option. One day, happy effective might be common. That would be great. As it stands, happily effective is an end put after effective. If you really want happiness first, just keep lowering your standards and your salvation can be found in a day. Use your happiness wisely. Be reasonable with your happiness. It's a tool, like all the other tools you've been born with. Emotions work, and they work well for what they're evolved to do. When you start altering them without honoring their original intentions and reasons for being, you're likely to find out the other people with the old programming are going to outcast you, punish you, and take advantage of your pretty new system of happiness no matter what. During a childhood quarrel, if you were struck in the face and turned to the other cheek and smiled, your ass could be beat until they could figure out what exactly was wrong with you, for what could be more interesting than a person you could pummel and they'll actually enjoy it? Well, now you're getting your ass kicked constantly, and to the casual observer, you've found a way to love it, so that's great. Now some other poor kid doesn't have to get bullied when he or she wouldn't have enjoyed it. You're here to be the new whipping boy of the neighborhood. You could honor the world in the way that it's been most responsive to, and do it tit-for-tat strategy, where you give as well as you receive, or perhaps better. The world becomes a better place. Tit-for-tat is the most effective thing we've found, and it's literally how we hand out and authorize use of force by the government. If you commit a harsher wrong, you receive a harsher punishment. That's tit-for-tat. Perhaps your fighting back is getting someone in the state to retaliate for you through the use of law. That's fine too. The point is, when you try to cheat the nice local system that we live in by taking more happiness than is reasonable, you will be punished for it. Your fellow man will make sure that you don't get the happiness he's felt deprived of so easily if he can find a reasonable way to make that happen. There's a reason vandalism and mischief is so common among men, and it's because it's effective. If you break everyone else's stuff, the things you have are more valuable. Every experimental, non-tit-for-tat way of interacting with others has been shown to get abused by others that notice that they can get free profit out of the deal. Now, if you could just keep that happiness inside and didn't leak it out of your face, harming all the jealous fools who gazed upon you, you could keep much of the upside of an inner peace and joy without getting the beatdowns. You could even advertise tit for tat, but in reality not follow through, similar to how many animals mimic venomous animals when they actually aren't themselves. They get the benefits the venomous creatures do, without the effort it takes to actually produce toxins. It has worked for animals for millions of years, and it might work for you too. Make uncertainty work for you. Hell, that's how the speeding tickets work, right? The sign says that if you go over the limit, you'll probably get a ticket. But you know you most of the time really won't, and thus the highway itself is mimicking poisonous animal. Sometimes you will get bit, sometimes you won't. Is it worth the risk? Many tend to follow the speed limit, because to know the difference between the day you will get caught for speeding and the day you won't is too hard to tell and too expensive to risk. Just like toying with a snake if you can't tell whether it's a real venomous coral snake or a harmless red milk snake that looks similar. Sun Tzu said that all war is deception, and the art of war has been a bestseller for 2,500 years. Kind of makes deception in animals even more interesting. Think of all the instances we use in our own armed services, the same tactics that animals have been using for millions of years. If you are weak, attempt to look strong. If you are strong, attempt to look weak. Anglerfish. If you are near, try to seem far. If you are far, try to seem near. This is what camouflage does. It lets you grab your prey from an angle they're vulnerable from, like an octopus grabbing a crab from behind. Remember here, some of these things only work during times of war. During times of peace, you're always better off looking stronger instead of weaker. Looking weaker invites war. A good tool used at the wrong time is the wrong tool. Learn from the animals. Learn from Sun Tzu. Enjoy not being happy. You're supposed to cycle into and out of happiness, just like sleep, just like eating, just like breathing, in and out. The sooner you worry a little bit less about how happy you are, the sooner you get a little free happiness. Maybe it's okay to be grumpy. Maybe you like being grumpy. It could be a good deal for you. Or you could be doing grumpy wrong. Personality is an art. Don't optimize for happiness. I haven't produced anything for the world in 12 years since I left the company that I ran with 150 employees. I beat myself up about it rather regularly because I'm not doing what I should do. I'm not doing what I should do, and that I should be benefiting the world. I'm talking about the very specific, I need to organize my book. I need to write one chapter and then the next chapter. All the things I know I need to do that are very specific, and that's just book-related stuff. I've got similar things with different business ideas. I've got similar things with my personal health. I am a bundle of disappointment when I measure what I am doing compared to what I could be doing. We all have a way to do something we know we shouldn't be doing. For some people, it's drinking. Then you come back and you're in a state of stagnation. There's a time for partying, and there's a time for doing the things that you enjoy. SciVivers will tell you that those times are only after you have got something working for you while you're sleeping. It's just too powerful. It's too powerful to skip. Theoretically, you could be happy and productive. True SciVivers could strategize a way to do that. All it would require is a little bit of social reward, and you could be good to go. But without that social award, you may find yourself living in a vacuum, beating yourself up all the time. The more opportunity you have in the future, the more pain you'll endure because you will make more mistakes because you are pushing harder. This analogy has been made before. If you're a car and you're not moving, you're not going to see any bugs in your window. But if you're going 1,000,000 miles an hour, flying through life, you're going to have a windshield full of squished bugs. You need to choose. You want to be a shooting star, or do you want to be a dormant stone? Some people want to optimize for happiness. Optimizing for happiness, at least short-term happiness, could breed laziness and prevent longer-term happiness. If you ask Tony Robbins if he's happy, he's the best personal development life coach on the planet, a very wealthy and successful person. He may answer, absolutely. If you're in the business of search engine optimization and you don't rank number 1 for search engine optimization, that's a problem. If you're in the business of self-help and you aren't the most helped by your own self, you're a false prophet. It's self-referential, it's meta, and it's recursive. If you're lucky enough to find happiness before or during productivity, fabulous. But you shouldn't be optimizing for happy. It's too short-sighted.